Good morning, Master of Ceremony, the Ambassador. I recognize a few politicians in the audience. I see also I recognize Professor Bisani. In the beginning, I have been picking up many speakers that before you speak, the people have to know who you are, because otherwise they will not listen to you. But 20 years ago or more, I was in Professor Bisani's class of introduction to law, politics. Introduction to politics, and he was teaching us politics. And then the learners, they asked, the students, they asked him a question, because we were talking about this African culture of presidents moving with a lot of convoys when he moves. And they asked him the question, what would happen if tomorrow you become a president? I don't know whether I can remember what he said 20 years ago, but he said he will have a little choice, probably, but just to be like an African president also. So that is politics. But I have spent many of my years in a human rights division, but under the Ministry of Justice, and I have fairly traveled the world, and I've been in a very big audience, international forums, but talking about human rights issues. But this morning is very important. We are talking about democracy. I was listening to the Indian FM radio as I was coming, and one caller was saying, no, I'm hearing this story of who should be the next president. And I think I want to tell the people that we must just make the president who is more liked by the people. Democracy is about not what you are able to do, but when you are more liked. So I don't know what is democracy now. I was confused now with that scholar. Anyway, thank you. I have been asked to speak about human rights and democracy. I thought they would ask me to speak about the role of the Ombudsman. But I realized that being an Ombudsman, you can be thrown in anything. Since I think human rights is now, like everything, the way I see it in my few months in the office. Yeah, in the history of mankind, human rights have not been given so much attention like in the present time, which means, in my view, human rights is work in progress. In other words, the concept of human rights is a result of a long and continuing process of development that has not yet reached its conclusion. But the concept is progressively developed as an ethical standard through the ages. I saw in that Africa there is the word ethic is also there. So eventually the concept of human rights underwent political development in 1945. We all know what is 1945 all about in the world, when the UN was founded as the first universal political organization responsible for promotion of the fundamental rights of humankind. The dignity and value of each human being was then brought forth. As a result, states are no longer free to take the view that they could treat their own citizens as they like by invoking the principle of sovereignty and non-interference in the internal affairs of other states. So that was the turning point. But the question is, what is really human rights? The concept of human rights includes all freedoms the individuals humanity. There are rights which are safeguarded by society on ethical grounds. The word ethical is coming up, is keep on popping up. It's a very important concept. There are rights that people are born with and to which everyone have an equal entitlement regardless of gender, ethnic origin, or beliefs. Human rights are essential principles in any organization in a modern society. Now, you must include government in that word organization. And it is the basis of peaceful cohabitation at the national or international level in the community and in the family. So if you don't have human rights, you cannot coexist in a peaceful environment. But despite all that little explanation, you can have a book to explain human rights if you want to. But just to give you a synopsis of what it means. But despite all that explanation, it is often not very clear, really, what is meant by these rights and what do they really include. For example, in a political debate, the issue of human rights has been the cause of controversy. Mainly, the uncertainty is the following points. I think there are about 4. In the legal nature of human rights, they ask questions: are they indeed rights or simply appeals or merely programs? They ask questions like, is healthy environment a human right? Or access to clean water, to drinking clean water, is it a human right? What about the right to food? Is it also a human right? All this simply is actually programmed, is an obligation of the state, and they are directly binding once enshrined in the national constitution and international instruments. The other point is to the recipients of these rights. There are these questions as how do they claim these rights? From whom do they claim these rights? It's from the states, because in terms of the international instruments, the state has 3 main obligations, and that is defense, protection, and entitlement to benefits. Are they rights which people owe to one another, or are they rights that they just owe to the state, or the state owe the rights to the citizens? So these are the controversy in the political arena. The other one is the implementation of these rights. How are they to be implemented in individual cases or in real life? Who monitor the compliance and ensure the implementation of these rights? The other one is the applicability. The question is, are human rights a universal nature, or are they essentially based on the so-called, I'm going to use the word so-called Western values, because the many sections of our population in Namibia, when they read chapter 3, some don't agree that those are our values. They say, no, these are Western values. They forgot that we fought for those values. If we didn't fight for those values, it would not have been in the Constitution. Because our Constitution was written in 1990, and the UN Charter was already in place by then. And these values were there. But if you remember, during that period, 1945 to 1990, for us, we didn't enjoy those rights. We were denied those rights. You remember? Because there was this apartheid and those type of things. So, in other words, didn't enjoy it until we actually fought for it and incorporated in our constitution. So that it cannot be correct to say it's our Western values. It is our values. So, yeah, I was talking about this point of saying, are human rights universal in nature, or are they essentially based on the so-called Western values that are not really transferable to other societies? So those are the controversy in the human rights aspect. So you will find many nations are still pulling strings as how to go about what is human rights. But what is clear is the state is the main role player in human rights. I'm using the word state because it's different from the word government. State includes many of you who are sitting here and your institutions and your organizations that you represent. And there are three obligations that the state has to fulfill. That's to promote, protect, and fulfill human rights to its citizens. The question is how. Actually, the answer is by putting administrative and legislative measures in place to comply or to meet the provisions of the national constitution and the international human rights treaties or instruments. So that's the basis of the state responsibility when it comes to human rights. One thing is also certainly very sure that one cannot enjoy human rights if you found yourself not in a democracy. Now the question is, what is a democracy? I take the explanation from the Excellency the Ambassador when she spoke about democracy. You see, we can also write 50 books about democracy. That's definition alone. So, but here is my concept, my take on the Africa barometers that were referred to by the organizers of this important conference, that which is actually of this year, that indicates that there is a decline in the people of Namibia who still wants to live in a democracy. Well, I'm not so sure, since we will get to the point as how many democracies do we have? In my view, you have three types of democracy. The regular democracy, liberal democracy, and social democracy. So that's why there may be the respondents to the survey, they want the other democracy, not the one we have. The one we have, in my view, is the liberal democracy. I will get to the point, I will tell you why I'm saying it's liberal democracy. You see, they are correct to say that this trend is not just in Namibia, but it's worldwide. Democracy is actually declining. But maybe it's not really declining in the context of the meaning of democracy, maybe in the context of what type of democracy the people in different parts of the world want. What I can tell you is probably will shock you that the reality is only 20% of the world lives in liberal democracy. So it's there in the public domain, in public information. So the rest are living in a different democracy that I mentioned, and Sharia laws, authoritarian regimes, we have to count ourselves lucky to be in the 20%, which is actually the liberal democracy. On this point, I want to draw your attention that when we talk about democracy, some countries are claiming to be democracy, but if you read their constitution, the word democracy is not there. But Namibia's democracy constitution, in the first article, you will pick up the word democracy there. Article 1 talks about Namibia will be based on, is founded on democracy, etc., etc. But go to the champion of democracy constitution, the USA, for example, you will not find the word democracy in their constitution. Maybe it's a shock for you that it's there in the public. You all have the device, you can read now. You will not find it there. But they are democracy, they call themselves democracy. But the challenge is, are they the same democracy that we are talking about? No, they have their own democracy, different from the rest of the world. So actually, the word democracy comes from the Greek words demokratia. It's actually two words, demos and kratia. Demo means people, and kratia means power. So in a democracy, or in democracies, it is people who hold sovereign power over legislature and government. And that's basically what the Namibian Constitution says. So we have that. Although, as I said, nuisance applies to the world's various democracies, certain principles and practices distinguishes a democratic government from other forms of government. I also checked on the other important role players in the survey, global surveys, the Economic Intelligence Unit based in the UK. They also had their index in 2020, and they looked at 167 countries, and they grouped them in 4 categories using 5 indicators of democracy. Electoral process and pluralism, functioning of government, political participation, political culture, and civil liberties. Those are the indicators. But interestingly, when you look how they ranked the countries, they ranked them actually in 4. They used strange words: full democracy, which is from 0 to 10 points, and that's full democracy. They gave it a dark green color, and then from 0 to 80 points, that is, they said this is the flawed democracies, and it is a light green color. And then the third group is hybrid regimes, and then they gave them orange color, that is from 0 to 6 points, and then the last group is the authoritarian regime. They gave it a red color, which is from 0 to 4 points. Now, when you look at that, you will have time to look at this. You will see Namibia is not in the dark color, in the full democracy. Namibia is in the light green color, which means we are in a flawed democracy. Now, that's strange, because what they say about flawed democracy, they say that according to them, this is where you have free and fair elections and basic civil liberties, but you might have some issues with freedom of press. Really? Namibia have issues with freedom of press? The country that has been knocking down the superpowers in global freedom index. So you see, I will get to the point of the question is, what should we do to strengthen democracy? A written constitution like this one of Namibia is the most important provision which the nation citizens agree to live by. It has outlined the structure of government, that's the constitutionalism based on ideas of individual freedom, community rights, and limited government power. That's what we know. We have that in our constitution. So one can see that really Namibia is, like the director said, that we count ourselves in a democracy. And that's not just a democracy, but a liberal democracy. But there is really an important point here. There is a need for us to strengthen the rule of law in order to respond to the practical challenges of the present social and economic cultural issues in the society. But when you want to strengthen the rule of law, you also have to ask yourself the question, what's really the rule of law? I will share with you the definition of rule of law as it was highlighted by the former UN Secretary General, the late Kofi Annan. And this is what he said. And this is what he said. It is a principle of government in which all persons, institutions, and entities, public or private, including the state itself, are accountable to laws that are publicly promulgated, equally enforced, and independently adjudicated, and which are consistent with international human rights norms and standards. So I think that definition tells you everything. Rule of law is not just the law, as we talk about the Ombudsman Act or the Constitution, but the rule of law is also institutions of states. And as you know, there are permanent institutions in a democratic state, and that is public service, police force, national defense force, the judiciary, the ombudsman's office. Those are permanent institutions. So when you want to strengthen the democracy or the rule of law, you have to go for to target these institutions that you must put the best of the best. In other words, like the ambassador said, education is actually really the key. I wanted to share with you one of the, when you enter the university in South Africa, I will not mention the name of the university, there is a writing on the entrance that talks about, if you want to destroy a nation, then you have to offer a substandard education. Because what will happen is, those people that will come out of that university, they will then, the doctor will kill people on the operating table. The engineer will build the building that will collapse on people. So it's interesting. It's also your public domain, you can find it. So education is actually the right way to go, strengthen your system or your rule of law. What we have in this country is, actually, I have 1 minute. Can I go 1 minute? About there you have to use meritocracy. Meritocracy, there are two things there. There is a difference between merit and meritocracy. Meritocracy is the concept that has been used by successful economies in the world. For example, Singapore is the champions of meritocracy. But China is also emphasizing strongly on its meritocracy. That's why you see they are the second biggest economy today. So I think